Welcome back to the podcast, Daniel. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
We tried this. In round one. We had a few technical issues, and I really appreciate that you came back.
My pleasure.
So we're actually sitting in a place called the Collective Macomb, and I wanted to give a shout out to Carly Nemtine, who runs the Macomb. It's a workspace, and she allowed us to run this podcast here. So again, much appreciated that you came back. I know time is valuable.
Yeah, big shout out to Carly and to Sharon. We've done several events here. It's a wonderful space.
It's a great space. And I also wanted to start off by asking you, what is it that you actually do for a living? And I know you have a background in journalism, but you're now working with a group called AVI, Allied Voices for Israel. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a longtime Jewish community professional. I started, freelancing for Canadian Jewish News, and when I was like 25, something like that. And then I eventually moved to my first job in the community was UJA. And then, I was back at CJN and then at B'nai B'rith for a while. And I ran a campus organization for a while. And then in March of 2023, having been in the community for, 12 years at that point, I saw that there was what I felt was a gap in terms of organizations and programming that really focused on allyship, and especially uniting Jewish and non-Jewish students, and offering like educational opportunities for Jewish and non-Jewish students, but also opportunities to create conversation, because really those conversations I felt weren't happening as much as I would have liked to see. I had this idea far before October 7th, and we launched half a year before October 7th, or we had the idea for it half a year before October 7th. We went all in. I would say since October 7th, there has been more, coming from the community and from organizations that have been focused on allyship, which is great. But we do it in like a very niche way, where we are working to unite students of all backgrounds. We offer educational programs abroad to Israel and now also to Italy, which is a very historical trip, and I can explain more about it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And the idea is you're going to get these incredible experiences abroad. You're going to work and unite, with students who are Jewish and non-Jewish alike. You're going to learn from each other. You're going to build bridges. You're going to come back to your campus and you're going to serve as an ambassador, not just necessarily for Israel, but for peace, for coexistence, for human rights, and for conversation. Because on campuses today, conversations are not being had.
They're not having conversations. They're having protests, counter protests.
Exactly. This is what like the world of activism has led to. This idea that me versus you, left versus right, black versus white, Israel versus Palestine, Jewish versus Muslim, and everyone is versus now.
Right.
You could say one word and I don't need to know anything else about you. You are now my enemy,
Right.
and that's what's happened on campus. There's data that backs that up. I would blame first and foremost the radical professors, the Marxists, the professors who now call themselves activists as well. You cannot be an educator and an activist with an agenda at the same time. Those two, don't
Right.
go hand in hand.
They're not supposed to have an agenda.
They most certainly are not. Right. And I think what they've created, what these radical professors have created, and now in turn, and some administrations and also the student groups and the student body, they've created an environment where students are scared to speak,
Right.
scared to have conversations, and scared especially about any issue that is deemed contentious, anything political, but anything regarding race, religion, culture, sexual orientation. There are studies now that show that a big chunk of students avoid these topics altogether. And history shows that when you are not able to have conversations about these things, that's where critical thinking goes to die.
Right.
And the university campus is supposed to be the opposite of that. Right.
Well, Are you familiar with Sam Harris?
I am.
Because he's actually coming. I just saw he's
Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center are bringing him in.
Francis Sun.
They
He's
always
bringing
bring in
him
good
in.
speakers.
I've been
Like
following
Olivia
him for years. Yeah, 100%. And he has a line that says, "Once conversation ends, the only next option is violence."
Yeah, I actually heard also Charlie Kirk say the exact same thing.
And we saw what happened with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, wherever you were on whether you agreed, like first of all, I don't think there's anyone you're going to agree with on everything, and the idea that we should actually is very scary. You know, the idea that I'm going to agree with you with every single thing, that's like the destruction of the personal identity. You know, that's destruction of human beings. You know, I started watching the show Pluribus. Have you watched it?
No, I haven't. I'm not familiar with that.
So it's Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
You know, and it's like, not to give it away, but like the idea of like the show is what happens when like a society kind of embraces a hive mind, you know, which I think is very representative of like mob mentality, right? Like, we see so much of mob mentality, you know, taking place today, and especially again on campus.
Is that on HBO? Where are you watching?
It's on Apple TV, and I had a 3 months free subscription.
Okay.
You know, because if my wife is watching this, she'd be like, "What? Another one?" But no, 3 months free.
Right. Okay. So you're safe. You're safe for now.
For now.
Yeah. E pluribus unum. Right. So that's
well, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's an interesting show, Nathan.
yeah. I will check it out. I will check it out. So actually, I was following your work. I saw you were posting on social media. You were just in Italy for this you call it common ground trip. Looked incredible. I saw that you went to the Arch of Titus and you saw the etching of the Jewish prisoners carrying out the menorah, and evidence literally in stone that we were in Israel, thousands of years ago. How was that trip? I wanted to ask you, and what were the main takeaways from Italy?
Yeah. So the idea behind Common Ground is to bring students of all backgrounds together to find your common ground and bring it back to campus, right? Now, so we're making an investment in each and every one of these students, you know, and what we hope that they do with that investment, you know, is serve as ambassadors, you know, Avi ambassadors on their respective campuses, right? And what we found as well, you know, because the students that we work with are of, such mixed and diverse backgrounds, you know, that it's not always, I think, the most effective way. Oftentimes it actually isn't the most effective way to, to make an impact by just bringing a huge, massive Israeli flag to your campus, right? You know, because when you bring this huge, massive Israeli flag, you're immediately sending a signal, and you're sending a signal to the people who identify that flag. So the people who love you are going to see that flag and they go, "Hey, why I want to interact with you." And the people who hate you see that flag and want to come and interact with you.
Right. It's very charged symbol.
Yes. And listen, it's a symbol that I wear. It's a symbol that we encourage, you know, our students always to wear. And a lot of our non-Jewish allies actually wear Magen David's as a showing of solidarity. But when our goal is to engage in conversation, good faith conversations, right? And when our goal is for students to engage the movable middles, individuals who don't have an agenda or a view that's already kind of set in stone, but are willing to learn, even if they disagree, especially if they disagree. That is the purpose, right? So we want to give experiences to students, right, that they can then get confidence, that they can again have stories that they want to share, and then we want them to go back on their campus, you know, and do this meaningful work where they can build bridges with other students. And it's the idea of conversation that's really centered, because as I mentioned earlier, students are so scared to have conversations now. And this is across the board. This isn't just Jewish and Zionist students. And it's not just Jewish and Zionist students that feel targeted, right? There's many reports of Iranian students who feel targeted, especially over the last few months, of Christian students, of Hindu students, and of students who feel politically conservative feel targeted. So the idea behind this program to Italy is from the lens of understanding why Jews are indigenous to Israel, right? So it's a historical trip. It's very much focused on the history of Israel as it intersects with the history of Italy, right? Which is
Is
fascinating.
that why you chose Italy as
So I first and foremost chose it because of the Arch of Titus, which you mentioned.
right?
10 years ago, I started working in Benabirth, Canada. And on my first day there, I started working with a Métis advocate named Ryan Belrose, and it was his first day as well. And Ryan really helped put that idea in my head of Jews as an indigenous people. And it was something that, wow, I really came to understand it. And so much so that this has now become like our principal program, our educational workshop that we teach of Jews as an indigenous people to Israel, is understanding the connection Jews have to Israel. And why do we do that? And why do we have this focus on it? Because we see that how students are demonized today and how Jews are demonized today is through the lens of anti-Israel hatred or anti-Zionist hatred or whatever it is. And we understand Zionism and we understand Israel as part of the Jewish story, as part of Judaism. There is no Judaism without Israel. And what is Zionism? Zionism, it's Zion. It's a name for the mountains of Jerusalem, right? It's another nod to the land and the importance of the land.
And Jews, right? and the name Jew comes from Judea, right?
Precisely, right.
Yeah.
And I think so many people, the majority of people, I would argue, don't understand that Israel is not political to Jewish people. While yes, there is a political sovereign state of Israel, our support for Israel as our homeland does not change whether it's a left-wing prime minister like Yitzhak Rabin or a right-wing prime minister like Benjamin Netanyahu. It makes no difference to us, to Jews, right? So the purpose of the trip to Italy, hilariously, right, is to understand that Jews come from Judea, that Jews come from Israel, especially because this is for university students. I can't tell you how often university students hear this idea that, oh, Jews are from Poland or Jews are from Europe.
Right. Or Russia.
Or from wherever,
whenever,
and I get asked by people who are Arab or Iranian all the time, oh, where are you from? Are you from Egypt? Are you from Jordan? Are you from Syria? Are you from Iran? And I'll say, oh, I'm from Israel. And I've had people say to me, oh, so you're European. Right.
Oh, really?
Because I look
so
European. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Right. Because that's the argument that they have. Right. So we're able to show them from an Italian lens why Jews are indigenous to Israel, which is very fascinating. So it began with this idea of the Arch of Titus, and that was through working with our First Nations friends. Right. And then in continuing to work with our First Nations friends, we understood more of how we can make this argument. So, for example, the Colosseum, right? Our Israeli-Italian tour guide, tells us how the stones that built the Colosseum were taken from Jerusalem when the Roman army defeated the Jewish army, and then they sacked the Second Temple and brought back the spoils of Jerusalem, and that's what you described. That it's on the panel of the Arch of Titus. It's literally the Romans carrying.
It was really a middle finger to
the Jews,
saying, not only did we conquer you, but we took your leaving our place and we're making fun of you, basically. Also in the name Palestina, which they
that's the next
changed as well.
So that's the next thing. Like later after, so first of all, when they sacked the Second Temple, it happened in 70 CE, right? And the Arch of Titus was built and completed by 81 CE. So we're talking just 11 years later, right? When you go there, right? The Italians will tell you how this is carbon dated archaeological evidence, right? That we defeated the Jews in Jerusalem.
And are they proud?
This happened.
Are they?
Well, I'd say.
what's the relationships?
I'd say now it's very much kind of like, because it's
removed. It's still removed.
Yes,
right?
It's very removed.
They don't see themselves as Romans.
No, I wouldn't say that.
2026.
I think maybe some people still do. And that's very interesting as well. But overwhelmingly, when you hear it from the tour guide, and we have like a special Israeli tour guide, but when I've heard other tour guides describe it, the incredible thing is that they describe this as a factual historical event that happened, right?
Yeah.
So when you have students, anti-Israel students who, and again, we don't tell our students to get into wars with anti-Israel students everywhere, but sometimes it happens. And I've had students, now that they've done this trip, tell me, I had a student, for example, who wasn't Jewish, told me how, I was in this frat, and a couple of the students were telling me how, the Jews are from Europe. And he's like, well, I actually was in Italy. And in Italy, I saw the Arch of Titus. And the Italians told me how they defeated the Jews in Jerusalem, in Judea, in the land of the Levant.
Right.
And that happened, and that they have this archaeological evidence of it happening, and it's in their history books. And explain that
They
to
do
me,
teach it.
right? Yes,
They
they
do
do
teach
teach it.
it.
Right. And he said, explain that to me. And they were like, no, that sounds like you learned it in Israel, that it's Zionist propaganda. And he goes, no, I learned it in Italy, and it's a part of Italian history.
Right.
And they didn't have an answer to that. Right. And they didn't have an answer to that argument, right? That this was what he learned, on this trip to Israel, to Italy, sorry, learning about this Jewish history,
Yeah.
and that's something that's incredibly powerful, right? So they see that Hadrian's temple,
Yeah.
right? There's a temple built for Emperor Hadrian, and he's the one who renamed the land. It was at that point the Roman province of Judea,
Syria,
and they
Palestinian.
Syria, Palestina, exactly.
Palestina, yeah.
Right. So Emperor Hadrian is the one who officially gave them that name. Right.
Yeah.
That's a very important part of the history if we want to understand where that name comes from. Right. You have the Colosseum, as you mentioned, and then even actually understanding who were the Roman Jews. The Roman Jews were Jews that came from Judea. They were Jews that came from Israel. It predates Ashkenazi and Sephardic and Bukhari and anything else.
Because
It's
this
Jewish
was
from
before,
Judea.
This was before the
This
split
was
off
before the diaspora.
and the exile, the diaspora, right?
Right. This was before there was a Jewish diaspora, that the Jews were only a people in a land. And that, I think, is the other thing that we as an organization put so much emphasis on, because I think there's a lot of understanding of Jewish religion, and there's a lot of programs explaining Judaism as a religion. And what we believe that people are always forgetting, and this ties into their non-understanding of Jews achieving self-determination in our indigenous homeland, is that we are a people, that we are a tribe, that we are a nation, right? That is equally integral to our story as Jewish people, right? As it is to follow the Torah and the Tanakh and, and the books that have guided us.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
But we did, I think, not a great job explaining this, especially after World War II, and you can't blame Jews coming from the trauma of the Holocaust and not being able to explain this well.
Right.
But I think that was like one of the core issues, that people understand Judaism as a religion when it is not exclusively. It is a religion. It is a nation. It is a tribe. And how many Jews do you know that might question their relationship with Hashem or with God or whatever it is, but still be very Jewish, still do Shabbat dinner, still, keep the Sabbath, still do Chagim, holidays, or whatever it is, right? There's a deeper connection there.
Sure.
And that's what we do through, through experiencing Italy, because a lot of that, I think people don't realize that. Even many Israelis, have said to me, they didn't realize this Arch of Titus was even a thing, which is
it's on
crazy.
It's the emblem of Israel, isn't it?
Yes.
It is the emblem of Israel. It's on the passport. It's right there. So I think there was a reason why they chose that.
Yes, it is. And that menorah is like the menorah from the Arch of Titus specifically.
It's the same menorah, right?
Yes.
Yeah. About the success stories. What's the reason that you get up in the morning and say, yes, this is why I'm running AVI? What do those success stories look like for you?
Yeah. So we call it Avi, because Avi is Avram, the father of monotheism, and we try to do all this work to bring, people of monotheistic faith together. So if I can help make that push, call it Avi instead of AVI. Mind you, a lot of people call it AVI, but
okay.
But just so you know, Nathan, you don't know what we're sitting here. Because that's just kind of how it's come.
Sure.
Listen, like I can share several success stories. I can share several stories of anti-Jewish hatred. Unfortunately, there's too many to count, and that's really, our strategy is to ensure that we're not duplicating the efforts of other organizations. I'd say there's a lot of organizations that are like effectively responding to every single act of anti-Semitism. They're putting out statements, they're putting out letters, and we want to complement those efforts. So rather than doing that, everything that we try to do is very proactive. And that's why, we speak to, proactive education, proactive coalition building, proactive opportunities for conversation, because when we do that and we can create those opportunities, we hope to change, the peoples and the communities where we are being active, so that they'll have that understanding and that they then won't fall victim to, the anti-Jewish disinformation and propaganda that's run so rampant, right? So there's really that's what keeps us going, and that's why I wake up in the morning. So a couple of great success stories. This Monday, as an example, so just a few days ago, we had in partnership with Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, Indigenous Embassy Jerusalem, and Kanata House, we hosted what people are telling me was the first ever Jewish First Nations Friendship Symposium, where we had 70 to 80 people in attendance. Half of them were First Nations leaders and representatives from across the country.
Wow.
Half of them were, Jewish leaders, and we had reps from a few different organizations as well that we invited.
Where was that hosted?
It was here in Toronto at a synagogue.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was, how can we learn from each other, right? How can we share with one another? How can we be better allies to each other, right? And there were parts that were uncomfortable, because there were parts,
Right.
I think, these First Nations leaders have done, many of them, an incredible job in standing up to anti-Semitism. If you read or heard about Harry Laforme or Karen Rustool or Dr. Sherry Trotter, they've all been outspoken advocates, right? And same, I'd say, for many of the Jewish community leaders, but overwhelmingly, I think there was a lot that we don't know because we don't get the opportunity to hear and learn from one another. And I think especially when they were speaking about how they're governed by the Indian Act and how, there's many people within their communities who actually don't support the way that the Indian Act is framed and established in Canada. I think that was surprising, for some of the people to hear. And I think that's what's so important, to be able to bring people's, who have a shared vision for Canada. I think anyone who works with us has that shared vision of Canada, which is a Canada that embraces tolerance, right? Tolerance of people who think differently, tolerance of people who look differently, right? Tolerance that we can have conversations respectfully here, right? And we can serve as an example to the rest of the world. That's why we come to Canada, right? When I meet a Palestinian here, I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to have a conversation with you. And even if we disagree about everything, right? We can agree that in Canada, we serve as an example to the rest of the world, that we don't shoot up synagogues or mosques, that we don't demonstrate outside places of worship, right? Because that's not demonstrating, that's intimidation, right? That we don't treat each other like the other, right? That we don't demonize one another, because we don't have to do that here. There's no reason that we need to do that, right? Nobody's telling me that Russians and Ukrainians should hate each other. There's 110 armed conflicts right now that are taking place right now across the Middle East and North Africa. We're not trying to bring those conflicts here now and say, oh, who's on this side and who's on that side, right? So we don't need.
We don't have to bring that to this.
We really don't. We really don't, right?
And we shouldn't do it.
And we shouldn't. Absolutely not. And it's not to say that we can't stand for causes. It's not to say we can't stand for the Palestinians. I have an argument, and many people agree with me, that the organizations that purport to be pro-Palestinian are not pro-Palestinian, right? They're exclusively anti-Israel. Because even when they get the opportunity to say, hey, let's support Palestinians in building peace with Israel so that they can have no more bloodshed, no more terrorism, no more no more murder, no more war. They will say to me, the pro-Palestinian orgs, no, that sounds like normalization. That sounds like make sure that Israel gets to exist. Of course Israel gets to exist. Yeah. It exists.
Well,
right?
that goes back to the famous three no's.
Exactly.
I think it was in Khartoum.
It was in Khartoum, Sudan.
The famous three no's.
Yes, and I'll tell you who upholds the three no's more than anybody. It's Palestinian Youth Movement, Students for Justice in Palestine, right? And any of the radical anti-Israel groups that have embraced Marxism full on, that have embraced radicalism full on, and they are the ones who are trying to divide us, right? So a positive story that I can share with you.
Yeah.
Well, right. In addition to the indigenous leaders and many other like interfaith programs that we've done recently, there's a story that I love to share. And there was a story of a student, right, who was, not Jewish, And he was a part of a Palestinian club at his campus, right? And why was he part of that club? Friends of his were in the club. Okay. So one day he sees an Avi student tabling. Okay. And our tablings, we have a variety of different tablings, and one of them calls for peace and prosperity for Israelis and Palestinians. There's no logos, there's no nothing, it's just black and white, those words, peace and prosperity for Israelis and Palestinians. Why? Because that's what so many of our students, or our Zionist students, want to see. They want to see Palestinians recognizing that Israelis are not going anywhere, right? That the only way forward is for them to live in peace. And that is not a political message for us. It's not embracing one state, two state, three state, four state. That's not for us. We're Canadian.
Yeah.
This is Canada,
Yeah.
right? We should embrace peace and prosperity for Palestinians and Israelis. So this non-Jewish student saw the table and he was intrigued, and he came up and he said, "Oh, wow, what is this, blah, blah, blah." And our student told him, and there were students who were part of the tabling that were both Jewish and non-Jewish. So they said, "Oh, we're with this organization. We support peace for Israelis and Palestinians." And he said, "Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm with the Palestinian organization, and we love this. This is so great," and blah blah blah. And our students lit up, because they never hear something like that.
Yeah.
So like, this is amazing. We should work together.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, right? So then he leaves with a smile on his face, and that day, one of the people he thought was his friends on the Palestinian club came to him and say, "We heard that you spoke to the Zionists," right? And he's like, no, you got it all wrong. They want peace for Israelis and Palestinians. And like, we have the same values, and there's so much we can do. And they told him, and they grabbed him by the shoulder like this. And they said, "You are not allowed to speak with them.
Wow.
You cannot have conversations with them. They are going to brainwash you. They are going to wait." The irony obviously was lost on them. And you cannot
Yeah.
speak with them.
Yeah.
And he said that he took a long, hard think about it. And he recognized that it was those Zionist students, Jewish and non-Jewish, who were trying to build a campus that he was proud of. One that encouraged coexistence and peace, and what he thought he was doing with the Palestinian club. And he left that Palestinian club and he joined Avi. Right?
Really?
Yes.
Wow. He's on the team now.
He's a student ambassador.
He's a student
Yes.
ambassador.
I won't mention his name or his campus.
Yeah, sure.
Or his background, but he's now a proud ally for our people, right? And that story to me represents the problem that we're seeing, on campuses, and the problem in general is that. And I'm not saying that it would be that easy to fix this. Anti-Semitism has been around for millennia, right? It's deeply rooted into so many communities and societies, right? And it's not that far-fetched when we understand the history, right, to also understand why is this happening. It's not that far-fetched that when we look at the United Nations, and 1/3 of their nations have systemic anti-Jewish biases, right, that they are systemically against Israel and the Jewish people, that they don't allow, a big chunk of their countries in the UN don't allow people with with Israeli passports like me, right? Then you can better understand why is the UN so anti-Israel, right? And understand that they are not an impartial, objective organization in that way, right?
Like you can't travel to Pakistan, for example, if you have an Israeli stamp on your passport.
Yeah, and there's, I believe, 20 or so countries, more or less, maybe a couple of less.
They won't accept you if you have an Israeli.
Yes, so that so.
I think Pakistan is unique in that it actually says on all of their passports.
Yeah, no, you cannot. Yeah,
the only country that we don't accept come in is Israel.
Yeah, Pakistan's one of the worst, and it's funny because they. Because there's Pakistanis who are very vocal, about their support for Israel and their support for building bridges and bringing peoples together. Raheel Raza, as an example.
Raheel Raza is fantastic.
She's one of the most brilliant advocates there is. She's actually plugging her. She's leading some workshops here at Makom this month.
Is she?
Yeah, she is. Yeah, a few actually. Check out Makom.
Exactly. Plug to Makom.
Right. There's other great success stories that I would share as well, in the sense that, a few years ago when we started this organization and we reached out to a bunch of student clubs, no one responded to us, right? But now that we've been doing this for 3 years and we've been building the work, The first time that we had an official tabling between our Jewish club and the Hindu Students Council at Concordia, I look at that as a win. Bringing Jewish and Ethiopian students together at York and working with the Ethiopian Students Club and going to Ethiopian restaurants, for Jews and Ethiopians to better learn from one another as a win. The bridges we built with the Iranian community, and we recently partnered with Cyrus the Great and had a great Iranian organization. We had thousands.
That's an organization, Cyrus. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they directly work with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, and there were thousands of Iranians and Jews in downtown Toronto at a rally where I spoke at that we helped organize.
Yeah,
that we took over Young and Bloor, right? And the flyers that were handed out, explained why the IRGC is responsible for everything that is happening right now. From the Houthis to Hamas to Hezbollah, right? So from Yemen to Gaza to Lebanon, all of this is due to the IRGC and the terrorist proxies that it's funding, right? And so many Torontonians, I think, were confused. Why are these Iranians chanting in Farsi, waving Israeli flags, marching down Young and Bloor?
Right.
And we tried to explain why, and why is there this partnership, and why do Jews and the people of Iran look at each other with such fondness? Like I myself, my DNA speaks to the historic Jewish connection with the Persian people, right? My DNA speaks to how long you've known each other.
You have a Persian.
So I'm
Bukharian.
Yeah. So the historians and the DNA would both corroborate that we are the Jews of Babylon, what are known as the Jews of Babylon, who were exiled from Judea, from the land of Israel, in 600 BCE, something like that. And then when Cyrus the Great Persian king, allowed the Jews to return, right?
Back in, right?
Right. Many of them returned because there was the yearning to go home, but some of them stayed and moved into Persia, right? And those were our direct ancestors.
So the ones who stayed
in
your
Persia were ancient ancestors, and then they ended up in. So those who stayed in Persia and remained, those are Iranian Jews, right? So the Iranian Jews are the Jews of Babylon. If you go into Los Angeles, and you'll find, thousands of Iranian Jews.
Yeah.
They are the Jews of Babylon, just like us.
Yeah.
There's Jews that went into Kafkaz, into the mountains. Those are Kafkazi Jews, right?
Yeah.
They are the Jews of Babylon. And then there are Jews who settled in the Emirate of Bukhara, which are my direct ancestors. And the DNA corroborates that, right? So when we talk about the Jews as a people, history corroborates it. Archaeology, like the Arch of Titus, corroborates it, and genetics corroborate it. Like that's a really legitimate evidence.
Reality corroborates that. Yeah.
Like that. You can't mess with that evidence.
No dispute there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you one final question here. If you were to speak to the average person out there on a campus, whether that's university or a high schooler, what words of wisdom would you leave to them? What advice would you give them? There's a lot of people who are afraid to show their identity.
Yeah.
What's your speech to that young person?
So my speech to that young person is, first of all, don't let social media corrupt your mind. Don't let social media give you a false and a fake interpretation of the world. Is anti-Jewish hatred incredibly high right now? Absolutely, it is. It's been around forever. For people like me who have worked in this space, it's been around forever. It wasn't something that popped up post-October 7th. It popped up post-October 7th in the most intense ways I've seen as a Jew, as an Israeli, as someone who works in this space, right? But it's also been most intense on social media, right? In the sense that that's where you see it.
That's where you see it,
where it's unavoidable, right? It's also been everywhere in terms of the workspace, in terms of schools. It's unavoidable on campuses. It's unavoidable in schools. It's unavoidable in all sorts of places. It's unavoidable in unfortunately, places where they claim are social justice, where they've been duped. So it's bad. It is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for any student, and I'll tell them that it's bad. However,
where's the but? Yeah.
However, I sense there's a big but at the end of that sentence. The but is, how are you going to show up in the world? When people show up in the world, and take anti-Semitism aside, when you're a negative person and you expect to find negativity, you find negativity.
Yeah.
When you're a positive person, you expect to find positivity, you find positivity. for people who say that karma exists, I don't believe that karma exists in the way that people do believe in it do. I believe that if I'm looking for karma, I'm going to find karma. If I've done something and then I expect to be rewarded from it, I'm going to find it because I'm there. I'm cognizant. That's where my mind is at.
Sure.
And that's what I would encourage for young people. Don't look for anti-Semitism. Don't be in the world of it. Don't, be prepared, be strong, wear your magenta beads, be who you are, but also don't expect the worst, because I think when we expect the worst comes. But furthermore, we are then not expecting good faith conversations, right? We are not expecting to have real conversation. We're expecting to have to defend who we are. And I'll tell you, as someone who works in the space, I've seen it myself.
Always on the defense, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I've seen me thinking, oh, shoot, this person is the hater, so my guard is up, right?
Yeah.
And it right away changes the way that we have that conversation. And I've tried this. I've tried going into a room with my guard up, and I've tried going into a room with a smile. And I've just found that going in a room with a smile, it goes a longer way in terms of me meeting people where they are and being able to be an Israeli, be a Jew. And believe me, wherever I was, even in Italy now, there was a ton of Free Palestine graffiti, anti-capitalist graffiti, anti-America graffiti.
You saw that?
I saw it everywhere. Okay?
Really?
Italy, it was everywhere. I wouldn't say it deterred us from exploring the history and doing what we're doing. It didn't deter us at all, right? But it was there. And still, when people saw me and I had people ask me, are you from Tel Aviv? I'm always going to take advantage of that opportunity. Yes, I am. Right? And I always am there to speak. And I'll always have a smile on my face. Right? And in my experiences, it's not to say that the Jew haters are going to stop hating me if I'm smiling. Of course not. Right? I don't care about the Jew haters. Nachoy to the Jew haters. Okay? If you know what nachoy means.
What does that mean?
I won't say, I don't know if you have to beep it out or
basically,
not. But basically, yes.
Jump in the lake.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to show up in the world based off of Jew haters and how they're going to engage with me.
Yeah.
Right? And again, it's not to say that everything isn't as bad as it is. It is. But I still believe, even with all that there's good people in the world. Right? I still believe, even that my own cousin, flesh and blood, was murdered by Palestinians on October 7th at Nova. I am not going to do what they do. I am not going to say, I hate all Palestinians. I'm not. I don't believe in it. I don't believe that it's the Jewish way. I believe that we must be the light, that two wrongs don't make a right. It's actually that simple saying that my mom taught me in the 90s, an easier time, I feel in many ways.
Yeah.
Right? That two wrongs don't make a right.
Right. Don't get into the mud.
Don't get into the mud.
Yeah.
And further, that is what they want. Right? Why do they come to protest? They want to see us get mad. They want to get a rise out of us. Do you think they'd like it if we just walked by and we didn't even pay attention to them? Do you think they'd like that? That they're busing into Bathurst and Shepherd, they don't live there, right? I don't think they would.
Yeah.
I think the whole purpose of this is that they want to bring us down. And there's many people in our community now who I think because of fear,
they're taking the bait.
Are taking the bait.
Yeah.
And they're saying, no, we need to be angrier. We need to be stronger. We need to this. That's not strength to me. It isn't strength to be an asshole.
Yeah.
It isn't strength that because they're being assholes, I'm going to be an asshole too.
Right.
It isn't strength to suggest the idea that I should go into a Muslim neighborhood with an Israeli flag. That's asinine. Yeah. That's not strength, right? Strength is to be who we are. We are the Jewish people, okay? This is who we are. No one is going to change me, right? And I'm not going to exist in the world because I'm always expecting the haters. And when I exist that way, right, and that's how I try, I've had many positive interactions, right? And I've had people call me out or this or that. I have a lot of Zionist paraphernalia that I wear. I have my gold in my ear t-shirts. I have my Theodor Herzl t-shirt. I have my IDF and my Israeli flags on my bracelet. I have tons of stuff, right? And still, I've had much more positive interactions than negative interactions. And this is not to sugarcoat it. And this is not to say that it isn't brutal in certain ways. It is, right? But what I would say to young people is, we don't encourage our students to go onto campuses, find those anti-Israel haters and go into wars with them. It takes a lot of your energy. It takes a lot of your emotional strength. And it also, from what we've seen, doesn't make the impact, right? There's enough people in the world and there's enough people in Canada, right, who have never met a Jew before. We're only 1% of Canada's population, that we could focus on them,
Yeah.
right? That we could
Yeah.
focus on those Canadians who were willing to have that good faith conversation, right? And whether we change their minds or not, if we can normalize that and they understand, right, through their experiences with Jewish people, that we are not that different from them and that we are not what TikTok is telling them, as the Tanakh says, he who saves one life saves the world entire.
Saves the world. I love it. I think we'll end on that.
Yeah, with some biblical wisdom.
With some biblical wisdom. Daniel, thank you so much for coming in. I think it's great what you're doing. And where can people follow your work? I guess.
Yeah, everywhere. We're on LinkedIn, on Instagram, our most popular platforms, but Facebook, Twitter. I don't use TikTok personally, but we are there.
Okay. All right.
Especially our emails go out twice a week. So definitely subscribe to our emails, and if you just come to alliedvoicesforisrael.org, you can subscribe at the bottom. And looking forward to having you join our movement.
I would love to. Okay, thank you so much again, and have a great rest of your day.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.